Hello, good morning, and welcome back to the Blood Red Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is Dave Comerford. And we're going to start, of course, with a few more transfer rumours. Papers reporting in Spain that Gabri Veiga, who's currently with Spain at the U21 Euros, reports that Liverpool have made a substantial opening offer for him. I believe his release clause is around £35 million. So, I mean, pretty similar to what we paid for McAllister. But, I mean, with Liverpool having got in a player of McAllister's quality for 35 million already, do you think they'll be looking for a bit more bang for the buck in terms of putting in a bid for Gabri Veiga?
This is a tough one, to be honest, because when you look at that release clause, that sort of 35 million figure that you mentioned there, I mean, you wonder if he is a target, why Liverpool aren't just kind of paying that automatically, just to kind of, I guess, just to get the deal done quickly, avoid any sort of drawn out process. On the other hand, I suppose if there's indications from the Celta Vigo camp that you can get him for maybe a few million less, then maybe that is the difference. I mean, maybe we don't know what Liverpool's budget is. I think they've very deliberately been kind of tight-lipped about the amount they have to spend, because you don't obviously want buying clubs to know that either. But, you know, if it is going to be the difference with another midfielder maybe on the horizon, with obviously one or two defensive additions needed as well, maybe, then I think, it's fair enough. The one thing that concerns me in terms of submitting an offer rather than just activating that release clause straight away is the fact that there's been a lot of reports about Chelsea being interested. I think some noises about Newcastle too. And obviously, if you drag your feet a little bit and the release clause does look quite reasonable, I think, for a talent of this caliber, really, then you could find yourself just bypassed. And even if you find yourself in a situation where the player wants to join as well, then you've got to be careful that you don't sort of find yourself in a dragged out negotiation where he gets a bit frustrated and he becomes more amenable to joining a different team. So there's basically a balancing act for Liverpool, I think, between getting the best possible deal, but also getting things done swiftly and efficiently.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously the issue with dragging your feet over deals like this. Obviously, I mean, we'll mention this, I'm sure, when we talk about Kone and Thuram a bit later, but Gabri Veiga is also at the Under-21 European Championships. Liverpool have said they weren't really going to look to do a deal for Thuram whilst he's there. I suspect they'll be thinking the exact same with a Gabri Veiga. Does that concern you at all that, Liverpool might wait around one or more of these players has an absolutely outrageous European Championships? I know it's not quite the World Cup or the actual Euros, but there will still be a lot of people with their eyes on it. Do you think there's a danger they have a really good tournament and sort of tack on an extra 5-10 million to their price tags?
I've seen one or two people worrying about this, and I mean, I see where they're coming from. I think, from the buying club's perspective, if they, say they're in the team of the tournament or something like that, then I think, you can look at that and say maybe that is an extra few million. But I think you touched on it there. I mean, it isn't the World Cup. It's not like the senior European Championships. And for me, you look at players like Bellingham, for example. I think his price tag probably went up quite a bit as a result of the World Cup. There's obviously a few others in there too. I don't think it's necessarily just I don't think it's based on necessarily the quality of the performances. I think it's the hype and sort of like the stock that kind of people put in the player. And I just think, I mean, this tournament isn't even on TV in the UK. To watch it, you've got to go onto UEFA's website. I think that shows you that it doesn't really have the higher profile. So I don't think it's going to make a huge difference to players' reputation. I think, like I said, maybe there is a few million in it, but I don't think any sort of deals that, if kind of the broad outline of a deal was in place before the tournament, I don't necessarily see, regardless of what happens, it kind of fundamentally changing those structures.
Yeah, obviously, hopefully, don't end up getting fleeced for a few more million for any of those players. But we'll move on to discussing Kone and Thuram, who it feels like we sort of discuss every morning or at least every day at some point here on this channel. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion online and in the newspapers about whether it'll be one of Kone and Thuram, whether it'll be both, how they'd work together. And I think, I mean, you mentioned that you've got to use the UEFA website to watch the games. I think it was actually lagging out a bit yesterday due to the sheer number of Liverpool fans tuning in to see Kone and Thuram playing together in the engine room. So, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about whether they've got contrasting styles. Do you think last night sort of shows that both could come in and fit fairly well together in a Liverpool shirt with no real issues?
I mean, my concern with that duo, and I really like both players from what I've seen. My concern is a lot of sorts of experts don't really think that Kone can play that sort of number 6 role. That would be sort of, I suppose, that would be a mark for Fabinho and Trent. He's not really maybe the specialist required for that role. And then after that, you're looking at kind of, McAllister is in that left-sided number 8 role. I think not fully sure where Thuram fits. I mean, I think he probably would be in one of the 8s as well. So whether you bring them in, I mean, I don't necessarily see them in the same midfield straight away. I think it would be, I think bringing them both in could still work in terms of long term, in terms of the fact that, you look at the profiles of players, they look like they're well suited to, playing for Liverpool. And also, I think it's just not normally a consideration, but obviously the brotherhood that they have, that they've spoken about. I mean, how much easier does that make it to adapt to playing for a new club in a new country, dealing with the spotlight, things like that. So I think that, there's definitely a few cases for bringing a couple of them in. I think Liverpool would ideally sign 2 more midfielders. And it's going to be interesting to see what sort of profiles they get, whether they do sort of get a couple of players who can start together, or whether there's sort of more of a depth signing in there as well. So the pieces of the puzzle still need to fit into place a little bit on that one.
Yeah, I mean, if Liverpool were to go out and get both of them, you said Liverpool probably do need 2 more midfielders. If it ended up being McAllister, Kone, and Thuram, and then just any defender really, would you be happy with that as a window?
I think yes. I think if you'd asked me maybe a little bit further back, maybe in the aftermath of Jude Bellingham, sort of Liverpool pulling the plug on that one, I think I maybe would have been sort of a tiny bit underwhelmed, just in the sense of it is quite a sort of drop down in terms of targets. And the McAllister deal, I just love. I think the other 2 players are 2 of the best sort of midfield talents out there. So I think you'd have to be quite pleased with that as a midfield rebuild. The only thing I would say on it is, and I wrote an article about this a couple of weeks back, I think, if you're, I mean, McAllister, I think, is ready-made for the elite level, but if you're bringing in two players, obviously from this under-21 Euros, which we've spoken about quite a bit, then what does that say about your timeline? Because they're not kind of completely established stars. And for me, they would need a little bit of time to sort of click into top gear at Liverpool. And that might suggest that Liverpool aren't necessarily focused on beating Manchester City basically next season, and then more kind of focused on preparing for the long term and just getting back into the Champions League next year. I mean, maybe they can win with these young players. Maybe it is just about kind of restoring that energy. Maybe it's about the attributes they have rather than necessarily, their age or anything like that. But I just do think that it would be quite a telling indicator of Liverpool's timeline if they did that. Having said that, if you offered that window that you mentioned to me right now, I think I'm taking it sort of 9 times out of 10, really.
It's an interesting point you make that about the about what Liverpool's window is, because I mean, if let's say they do bring in McAllister, Kone, and Thuram, there's every chance that Liverpool's starting midfield against Chelsea on that opening day is going to be, I mean, McAllister probably in there, but then you're probably looking at a Fabinho, a Henderson, an Elliott, a Curtis Jones, maybe people that maybe we wouldn't at the end of this last season have been expecting to be sort of looking to start in the midfield right at the beginning of the next season. But I mean, Klopp, he does like to give his players a fair bit of time to bed in, doesn't he? So do you think there's an argument that Liverpool need players that are a bit more Premier League ready already?
I think I remember reading some quotes from Neil Jones about that, saying that was going to be a big point of emphasis in the recruitment. I mean, obviously Mason Mount was a player that they wanted. There's been some talk about, I suppose, players like Caicedo and Rice as well, but obviously, they've just proven to be too expensive. So it did seem to be kind of informing the recruitment a bit, but obviously that's maybe shifted a little bit now towards these kind of talents in Europe. And yeah, it's like I say, I just feel as if to really compete with Man City next season, and I'm not saying Liverpool won't be in that position to in the future. You know, they bring in those players, you're starting to look at really what the next kind of great Liverpool team could look like, and it is really exciting. But I just think compared to players like, Bellingham, Barella, that we've been linked with in the past, I think maybe those are the caliber of players that you need to sort of reach Man City's heights. And I think you make a good point there in terms of it kind of illustrates my point as well in a way about how, you could turn up at Stamford Bridge, Fabinho probably start. You might even see, I know a lot of fans will be happy about this, Jordan Henderson playing sort of the right side of 8 role. McAllister, you'd imagine, could be in there straight away. But if you're bringing in players like Thuram and Kone, it really does emphasise that they are going to need adjustment time. And it just feels like the full effects of that midfield rebuild wouldn't necessarily be felt in that first season, like it would be a more long-term move. So, yeah, I think that, like I say, there's arguments for and against it because, you've got to kind of prepare yourself for the long term as much as you can. But is there maybe more of a middle ground with, the fact that we've got a lot of players who we need to maximise the years that we've got left because we're all around 30. Klopp's obviously only got a few years left too. And then there's obviously the possibility that those players are just sort of, they play under Klopp, they take a step up to a quality side and they're ready to sort of, deliver straight away. Maybe I am underestimating them a little bit, but yeah, it's for me, it's like I say, it does point to a longer term timeline.
Yeah, I think whoever comes in will definitely be looking for them to come on leaps and bounds under Jurgen Klopp. I mean, there's not many players who've come in during his time at the club and haven't really improved. So it remains to be seen who Liverpool are going to be getting in. Obviously, it looks like we'll be waiting until the conclusion of the U21 European Championships before we really see any big moves for any players playing there. But that is all we've got time for here on the Morning Bulletin today. So, Dave, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.